When you've unpacked your Brown's gas machine, your first thing is to plug it in and switch it on at the plug, and then you'll see that a little flashing light appears in this top left-hand corner and it says power. Now, to switch the machine on, you just hold your thumb or your finger firmly for about 3 to 5 seconds on that flashing light, and when the machine switches on, which I'll do in a moment, you'll hear a little bleep, and because the machine has got no water in it, there will be 5 long bleeps, and that is an indication that you need to fill the water up in the tank. So if I hold that, screen comes on and the 5 long bleeps. And what you'll also see is a flashing little light here, and it says low water. So obviously we send you the machine with no water in it. Once it's switched on, the very first thing to do is to fill it up with water. And we've got the lid here, and all you do is turn it anti-clockwise, 90 degrees, and you can take the cap off. And then there's a plug, which if you turn it anti-clockwise, you'll be able to unscrew and take out this orange plug, which looks like this. And then there is a filter in there. So you can't see this because of the angle of the camera, but you can hook your finger under it and you can take the filter out. And you obviously need to take the filter out in order to put the water in. And I'm going to put that just in a glass so it's out the way. And so then you put the water into the tank and you'll be able to look at the amount of water by looking at the display on the front. On the display, there's a part here that says TDS, and that stands for Total Dissolved Solids. And this is essentially the water purity. You only put distilled water into this machine, and the distilled water should be what's known as 0 parts per million. So the parts per million is kind of the amount of particles or dissolved solids in the water, and it needs to be 0. Now, not all distilled water that you buy will be 0 parts per million, although it should be. And this water purity sensor here will tell you if the water in the tank is not pure enough. So it should be flashing in the green, and if it starts to become in any way contaminated or the water you've put in isn't pure enough, it will start to flash in either the orange or the red, depending on the degree of contamination or impurity. So the water should always be flashing in the green, and if for any reason it starts to get to the point where the water isn't pure enough, the machine will start to bleep, it will stop operating, and it will tell you here that the water isn't pure enough, and what you'll need to do is empty the tank and fill it up with pure water. Now, it's very, very rare that the machine will just become contaminated for no reason. It's almost always because you've put water into the tank to top it up, which isn't pure enough. So what I have here is some distilled water, and I've put some of it into the jug. One of the things that we suggest that you buy, which you can get on the internet, on Amazon for example, is a TDS pen. So this allows you to test the water for total dissolved solids before you actually place it into the machine. So you might be thinking, why would I need to buy a pen to test before I put it in the machine when the actual machine itself has its own TDS meter? And the reason is we found that through a lot of customer feedback that a lot of the distilled water that you buy on the internet isn't actually distilled water, or if it is, it's not 0 parts per million. And you can then end up putting it into the machine and then the machine won't work. Or if the machine had good water in it initially and you're just topping it up and it just so happens that the new water is contaminated, you might find that the machine will still run, but you're basically contaminating your machine. And it's a good idea to use a pen like this to test the water before you put it in. So if I show you how that works, so I'm going to switch it on I can put that into the water and you can see that that water is 0 parts per million. And so I now know that the water going into the machine is always pure. Now, if you don't have a pen and you want to buy a water which we can kind of say is almost certainly going to be 0 parts per million, this is one that we've used a lot. It's one that we recommend, and it's one that we have a link to on our website. So Bob's Best is a distilled water where every time we've tested it, it's always been 0 parts per million. So if you want to order a water and absolutely know that you're going to get 0 parts per million, that's one that we know that we can recommend. So I'm going to take this jug and I'm going to just fill the tank up. And as I start adding water, you'll start to see the water level rise in the little indicator here. So I'm going to need more than what I put in, so I'm going to add some more in a moment. But just to let you know that you have a minimum and a maximum mark here. And so the idea is try and keep it topped up towards maximum, because when you do that, the machine produces hydrogen much more efficiently. So you're going to get a better output if you keep it topped up. If you top it up when you first get it right up to maximum, what will often happen is when you put the filter back in, which I have here, it will often push the water above maximum and then the machine won't operate. So if there's too much water in the machine, in the tank, the machine won't operate, and on the display at the top here, it will actually indicate the water is too full. And then what you'll need to do is drain some water out, and I'll be showing you how to do that later on in this video. So the idea, my suggestion is make sure it's above the minimum and probably keep it kind of 3/4 of the way topped up towards maximum. In a moment I'll fill it up to probably about here, and then when I put the filter back in, I know that I'm not going to push the water up too high. So you'll probably never really need to drain the water out of the tank, even when you're traveling with it, unless you need to reduce the weight a little bit. But the only real reason to drain the water out of the tank would be if you've contaminated it by putting bad water in. Other than that, the only other reason to drain water out would be if you've overfilled it and the machine won't operate unless you've actually drained a bit of water out. So I've filled up the tank with the water, and what you then need to do is you need to place your filter back in. You then need your plug, and you just screw that back in, twisting it clockwise, and it doesn't have to be super tight. It just needs to be relatively firm. And then you put the cap back on, and you just turn it, let it click, and that's the tank full and ready to go. If we look at the machine from different sides, we can see on one side we have 2 outputs. The top one is for hydrogen and the bottom one is for oxygen. And one person could be on this side using both of these to breathe in Brown's gas. So Brown's gas is a combination of oxygen and hydrogen. And then we have some outputs on the other side of the machine. And so another person could be plugged into here, and we only have one output, which is for hydrogen. So 2 people could be using the machine at the same time, but only one person can be getting the Brown's gas, which is from that side, and the other person getting just hydrogen from this side. And the other option that you've got is to use the goggles which come with this device. So you could plug your goggles into this side for the hydrogen, and then you could have the Brown's gas going into a cannula, and you could be utilizing all of that simultaneously at the same time. The next stage in the setting up is to get these little beakers and essentially unscrew them and fill them with water. So you might not see it on the video, but there is marking that says minimum and maximum. And my advice is to fill it to the line just before the maximum. These are very similar to the machine in that if you have them too full or not enough, then it stops the machine from producing a good output. So all we do is we make sure we fill these with distilled water, which I have in here, and if I fill that up with sufficient amounts, there we go, and then we do the same with the other one. And then just screw them back up. And then on the machine, if we turn it to look at the side, what you'll see is there is a little place for it to slot into. So this part here can just push and then drop in. And then you do the same on the other side. And that's the next part of the setting up completed. What you'll find in your accessories are 4 long white bits of tubing, 2 thick clear bits of tubing, which are smaller ones like that. You'll find an adapter which has got 4 connectors to it and a Y adapter there. And so depending on how you want to set your machine up, you will utilize those in different combinations. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how you could set this up for 2 people so that they were individually able to use the hydrogen on one side and another person could breathe in the Brown's gas on the other side. So on this side of the machine, this is the side that has just one output for hydrogen. And the way you set this up is you take one of these bits of tubing and you connect it to the top of here, connect it into here, and then slot it back in. And then you can use your cannula, which I have here. You plug your cannula in, and that's ready to go. So when the machine is switched on, this will produce hydrogen, it will bubble into the water, and then whoever's wearing this cannula will be receiving hydrogen. And they'll be receiving an output of 300 millilitres per minute of hydrogen, which is a middle of the range amount of hydrogen. So anything in the range of 120 to 150 is called kind of an entry level level of hydrogen, but that is a level where they've shown that there is actual therapeutic benefits. So this is more than double the output of our mini machine, which produces that lower end. So this is still a good output of hydrogen at 300 millilitres per minute. So we're now looking at the other side of the machine where we have the output of hydrogen and oxygen. And so in order to get the Brown's gas, we need to use the Y adapter, which is here. And then we use 2 of these longer cables. And what we do is we plug one side into here and the other side into one of the Y bits here. So I'm going to plug that one in there. And we do the same with another one. And I'm going to plug that one into there. And then what we do is we use this other bit of tubing to connect into here. And so I connect that into there, and we just kind of put that over to the side. But that is now set up so that if we plugged another cannula into here, into that left side, we could have different people using the machine. And if I wanted to, I could unplug on this side the cannula and plug in the goggles. And so this is now how you could set the machine up for 2 people or for one person and the other person, and also using the goggles on this side. So I'm going to show you how you can set this up to use the goggles and a cannula at the same time. So starting with the goggles. So on the side which is just the hydrogen, I've used a bit of tubing to connect to the little container with the water in it, and then I've plugged in the connector that goes to the goggles. So when you unpack your goggles and turn them upside down, you'll see that there are two areas where the Brown's gas, or in this case the hydrogen, will go into. So this connector is the one that comes in the packaging with your goggles. And what you'll see is, if you follow it to the ends, you've got two little bits here and here, and those are the bits that connect into your goggles. And then these are earplugs that you can put into your ears so that you're getting the hydrogen into the ears, and these bits go into the goggles. So if I just show you that, so I just connect one into there, and it's a good idea to push it as far in as it will go. You might need to twist it a little bit and make sure it's quite firm. And then the same on the other side. And there you are. So your goggles are ready to go. They're connected to the machine, and when you wear them, what you'll be able to do is everything inside the mask will be getting hydrogen, and then through the ears as well. So it's very good for maybe people with allergies who need to maybe dampen down the immune response and the inflammation in the eyes. And if you're breathing in through the cannula, you're getting up into the nose and the sinuses as well, and then into the ears. So a lot of areas where people suffer things like hay fever. And also it can just be good as a bit of a beauty treatment. So you're getting all of that hydrogen into the area of the eyes and the area around the eyes. And it's also good for people who may be looking at a computer screen a lot. So it might be that you just want to help the eyes to relax. And a lot of people will often use a machine like this whilst they're on a computer. So you can actually wear the goggles whilst you're looking at a computer screen, and you're actually relaxing and giving the eyes a treatment whilst you're working, and also breathing in the Brown's gas as well. So that is the goggles plugged in. And then on the other side, I've used the Y adapter to plug in these two and then plug it into here, and then we've got a cannula. So if you follow the cannula, you get to the bit here which has got the little bits that go into the nostrils. And the way you put this on is you want to have the little flap pointing downwards towards the lips, and then you would put these into the nostrils and then wrap it around the ears like so. And if you wanted to know what these cylinders are, which you might have seen on also the goggles, this is a water catcher, so you don't need to fill this up with anything. It just means that if any condensation is building up in the tubing, which is quite natural for any hydrogen or oxygen machine, then this just means that this catches the water droplets and means that you're not breathing them in, which could be quite uncomfortable. So if you needed to, if that got quite full, you can just twist, pull it apart, empty it, and then just twist it back on, and that's all you need to do. So there you go. That's how you would set up for using goggles with hydrogen and at the same time using Brown's gas. If you wanted to have the complete output from all three going into one cannula or even into the water stone, you set it up in the following way. So on the side that only produces hydrogen, you don't need the little water bottle like this. All you do is take one of the white pieces of tubing and plug it in. And then we go to the other side where we have the water bottle, and we take two more pieces of tubing and we plug them into the outputs on this side. And then you're going to need the cross adapter, and everything goes into there. So this is the tubing from the other side. We plug it in, and we do the same with each of these. So everything gets plugged in, and it doesn't really matter which ones go where, as long as they're all connected into that cross. And then the one which is left, you take another piece of tubing, plug it in, and that one will then go into the top. And there it goes. So when you turn it back, everything is plugged in to the bottle on this side. And then I can just show you that everything's going into there, and that can then be tucked away behind the machine. And essentially then you're ready to make either Brown's gas water, and I'm going to show you that next, or you could plug in a cannula and use it from one output. So I'm going to show you how to make some Brown's gas water. So I've still got the machine set up with everything coming into this one bottle, but it wouldn't really matter whether you just had the two outputs coming in just from this side or whether you just made it from the other side. As long as you plug your water stone into a bit of tubing like this and then plug it into one of these bottles, the output will go into the water. So at the moment we've got everything coming through one glass container, and so this is going to give us the full output of 900 millilitres per minute of Brown's gas in a ratio of 66.6% hydrogen and 33.3% oxygen. So this is the golden ratio. So if you're using this machine on your own and you've got it all plugged into one of these, then if you're breathing it in through the cannula or making your Brown's gas water, then you're getting that golden ratio. And this is how I would suggest that you get the maximum benefits. So all we do then is just press the start button, and it can take about 10 to 20 seconds, but you'll tend to start to see a bubbling in here, and then almost within a second or two it will come into the glass. And so I can start to see a little bit of bubbling in that container. And then I can start to see the bubbling appearing in the glass. And that's a really good output into the glass. Now, when you're making Brown's gas or even just hydrogen water with this machine, you don't need to use distilled water in the glass. You could use distilled water, but you can use bottled water like spring water or mineral water. You could use, as I've done, something from a water filter. Even just a standard Brita filter is fine. The general thing to avoid is just using normal tap water. So there's considered to be too much contaminants in it. So virtually any water, as long as it's not tap water, is the key. And you would let that bubble away for anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. And then when you've finished, you switch the machine off, and then you drink the water straight away. So if you were thinking about making some Brown's gas water to drink later on, then what you'll find is that a lot of that Brown's gas will have disappeared. So it doesn't stay in the water for very long. So if you want to get the full benefits, drink it straight away, and you can drink as much of this water as you want. It might be when you first get the machine that you just want to start with a glass of this a day and then build it up and see how you feel. And a good time to have a glass of Brown's gas water is in the morning. So when you get up in the morning, before you've had breakfast, before you've had anything else, make yourself a glass of water and drink it, and there'll be some really good health promoting benefits from doing that each morning. So here you can see the kind of output that you would expect to see. So my suggestion is, when you receive your machine, and you go through the setting up process, one of the first things to do is to make some Brown's gas water. And the reason for that is you can just check that your machine is working. So by putting the water stone in, you can see the bubbles and you know for certain that there's a good output. And you should be able to see an output that looks as powerful as this. So obviously if you're making Brown's gas water and you haven't plugged in all of the outputs, then the actual bubbling away will actually be less than this. So the more output there is, the more aggressive the bubbling is. So if you were just plugging it into this side only, it would be a little bit less than that. And if you were just using the hydrogen only, then it would be a bit less as well. So that gives you an indication of what to look for. If we just have a closer look at the screen, so at the very beginning I showed you that to switch it on, you just basically hold for 3 to 5 seconds on the power button, and that will bring the screen on. And the same to switch it off. So just hold your thumb or your finger on the power button for 3 to 5 seconds. So it's a long hold. This one here is, you can put it into night mode. So if you decide that you want to use this during the night and you don't want the screen to be so bright, just pressing that will just put the screen on a slightly less bright intensity. So if I bring that back up, this one here is your timer. So it's set initially when you switch it on at 30, but as you press this button, you can see it goes up to 90, up to 2 hours, and eventually up to 8 hours before then coming back to 30. This is your on-off button. So when it's not actually running and producing Brown's gas, these little icons here, which are just moving up and down, just tell you that it's in standby. And when I then press start, you'll see it comes on at 600. And that means that the total output of hydrogen is 600. And so you're getting 300 on one side and 300 on the other side. And then when the oxygen is added in, we have a total output of 900. You've got your TDS meter, which is the total dissolved solids, which I mentioned earlier in the video. This is to do with your water purity, and you can see this is in the green. And just going through each of these in turn, starting from this side, this is the filter. And if the filter needs to be changed, this will flash. And there might be a little bleeping that comes on as well, just to tell you that some attention is needed. And usually the filter, depending on how often you use the machine and for how long, will last anywhere between 6 to 12 months. But if the machine hasn't asked you to replace the filter after 12 months, it's a good idea to change it anyway at that time. This is unbalanced, and this indicates if the machine isn't on a flat enough surface. So if you tilt the machine, if I tilt that, say, forwards, you can see it starts to make a bleeping sound, and that's just telling you that it needs to be on a flat surface. And what it's also done is, you can see it's automatically switched the machine off as well. So I would need to then restart the machine if it wasn't on an even enough surface. This one here says water full, and that would be if you overfilled the machine. So if you put too much water in, it's not going to switch on, and this will indicate that you need to drain some water out. This is telling you if the water is too low. So when I was going through how much water to put in, there was an indication on the front of the machine, when you can see how much water is in it, that says minimum amount. Now you want to keep it above the minimum amount, but if you didn't check your water and top it up periodically and it dropped below minimum, the machine would then be indicating with low water that you need to put some more water in. So although it's ideal to keep it topped up so it produces hydrogen and Brown's gas much more efficiently, if you didn't check on it, eventually it would tell you to top it up. And this would be the indicator that would indicate that. Overheat is just telling you if the machine needs to be switched off and left to cool down for a while. So in some people, they might be using the machine a lot. There are people who, for various reasons, might be using the machine overnight and running it for 8 hours. And if you're running it for really long periods of time, and at the same time it might be a very hot environment, or you're very close to something like a radiator, then there is the potential that the machine might get very, very hot and need a bit of cooling time. And this will indicate that that needs to happen. And then overpressure is usually telling us that there is a pinch on some of the tubing or in the cannula in some way, and it means that pressure is backing up into the machine. So that will indicate that you need to just check your tubing, check your cannula. It might be that something's pinching or resting on it, and you can then resolve that problem. So there's a lot of really good technology built into this machine, which means that it's very unlikely that something will go wrong. So the main thing that you need to do is just make sure that you ensure that the correct water, 0 parts per million distilled water, goes into the machine. And if you do that, the machine will run and run and run. The one thing I would say on top of all of that is always make sure that you store the machine with water in it. So if you're not going to use the machine for a while, leave the water in the tank. Don't drain the water out, because the hydrolysis cell, which is the part of this machine that makes the hydrogen, always needs to be kind of saturated in water, otherwise it dries out. So keep water in the machine even when you're not using it, especially for long periods of time, and then you should be absolutely fine. So I'm going to show you how to drain water out of the machine, out of the tank. And to do that, I've turned the machine around, so we're now looking at the back of the machine. And you will also need this from the accessory. So this is the tubing that attaches to the back of the machine here, which allows you to drain the water out. And it actually says drain tube on there. And what I've done is I've got a chair and I've got a little jug. So this jug wouldn't be big enough for me to drain the whole tank into, but it's enough for me to demonstrate how to drain maybe just a little bit of water out if you needed to, just in case you overfilled the machine. So what you have here is a little cap that you can unscrew, and then underneath that is a little green plug that you pull out. And once you pull that green plug out, the water can drain out. But because it's a sealed airtight tank, in order for the water to drain out very easily, you would need to take the plug out from the top of the machine. So what I've done is I've just laid the machine down on its front. So we have the drainage area on the top. And if we come in a little bit closer, you should be able to see here that I can just twist the cap until it comes up off. And then can you see there's a green plug in here? And in your accessories, if that ever gets lost, there's a spare one. So this is something which you then just pull out like that. Oh, and a bit of water is already coming out. So that's the little plug, and you put that somewhere safe. And then with your drainage tube, you basically just slot it over there. And then it's simply a case of bringing the machine upright and letting the water drain into the jug. Now, from experience, this drain tube here easily detaches. So for example, if I just try to support it and I bring it up, it's quite easy for that just to detach very easily. So it doesn't stay on very well. So you just got to be really, really careful that that doesn't become detached as you bring the machine up and let it drain into the jug. So I'm just going to show you that if I bring the jug into place. So the best thing to do usually is to just support it there and then bring it upright. And you can see the water's coming out. And there we go. So the water's draining out, but then it's stopped. And what I would then do is So I'm being very, very careful. Then to allow more water to drain out, you would take the cap off on the top of the machine, which is here, and you don't need to take the plug all the way out, but you just need to release the plug just by a turn or two, and then the air can get in, and then more water will be able to drain out into the jug. But that's essentially how you would do it. But I do warn you that this tube which is attached is something to just be really careful that it does easily detach, and then you've got water just coming out everywhere. So maybe have a towel underneath if you need to.